Hi, this is Katie Rose coming to you from Attached Families. As you know, Attached Families is a nonprofit organization that we created to help support families who are raising children with developmental trauma disorder, complex trauma disorder, attachment disorders, reactive attachment disorder, basically anything in the alphabet soup that a professional puts next to the name of our children who have been traumatized. Uh, Most of our families are foster to adopt or adopt. Some are bio. A few are bio from like in utero trauma, and the other bios are, one parent was very abusive and neglectful, and the other parent eventually got custody and, was dealing with the same trauma that someone who, you know, fostered a child or adopted a child out of foster care would be dealing with. So usually we do a glimpse in the life of um, our families to so that society, government, professionals can see how difficult it is and really understand what we're going through. We usually write them up. Our families write them up and we take the write up and, post it with a, clip art picture and share it across social media. This one's a little bit longer, so we're doing a video of me reading it because it's really encompasses, I think, what all of our families go through and how we feel and what it's like to be a parent or caregiver of a child with attachment and trauma issues. So here goes a glimpse in the life. My child with RAD rages regularly. A child who rages at 4 may be exhausting. It may force you to pull patience out of the crevices of your being that you never even knew existed. But it is nothing like the rages as they get older when you're not successful in helping their brain and body heal enough to stop. I forged on for years, first without a diagnosis of RAD, reactive attachment disorder, for the first 6 years after they came to live with me at the age of 4. But even after the diagnosis, I was given no guidance, no assistance on what to look for in treatment or therapists, no specifics on what to do or what progression of this disorder looked like over time, or even the overall prognosis. Nothing. Just another diagnosis to put next to the multiple other diagnoses they had. More letters being added to the alphabet soup of letters they already had on their chart. I kept going, partly out of fierce, unrelenting love for my child, partly out of the unwavering stubbornness of my personality, and partly out of recognizing that there was no other situation that I could live with if I stopped looking for help. Every other option I could come up with would not have been in my child's best interest, so I trudged onward. I dreamed of a day when my child would begin to heal and get better and be able to be a willing, functional participant in the world as it is. A time when they would be more successful than not at managing their mental health and keeping the effects of early childhood trauma from hijacking their life in the present, shackling them to reenacting traumas so their life would never be anything more than perpetuating abuse on others and getting abused. When they could see and accept the care and love from those around them and know how to show love and care back, and to learn when to trust someone and when to not. So much I dreamed of for my child. I tried play therapy, family therapy, EMDR, CBT, TFCBT, medication, short-term psychiatric hospital stays, individual trauma, trauma-informed therapy, equine therapy, art therapy, finally wraparound in-home therapies and services. It was when we were, please forgive, I guessing a car is going by. Life with dogs. It was when we were given 2 years. How about we do that? I'm sorry. It was when we were 2 years into in-home therapy services when an event happened that really made me question how my child was ever going to get better if a trained therapist could not even maintain the level of calm needed to get through 1 hour long session. Now remember, our families have to do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, year after year after year after year. And the professionals cannot handle our children for an hour. That's just me. Back to what I'm reading. My Rad was 12 years old. Like most children with Rad, they got angry whenever they felt others knew they were being dishonest and were holding them accountable, or when being held to expectations they didn't want to be responsible for. Despite being entirely capable in every way of brushing their teeth, brushing their hair, taking a shower, changing into clean clothes, expecting them to do this daily and without disrupting everyone else's abilities to get ready in the morning was causing huge issues. I had tried a myriad of approaches to help them transition from me needing to be next to them every step of the process to independence, all of which failed. They wanted me next to them and engaged with them every single second of their waking hours and fought any separation from that, like their very existence relied on my presence. Again, I'm stepping away, and this is Katie Rose speaking. They need to be in control at all times. Constant control. Constant. My attempts to get them to do these basic tasks individually would spark off a whole series of defensive behaviors in hopes that I would drop those expectations for them. I refused. It was in this context, with 2 in-home therapists engaged in a family counseling session with all 4 of us, that my Rad 12-year-old began to rage. We were trying to process how to make this situation so they could meet expectations and asking for their opinion on what would make it easier. My 12-year-old wanted none of it and began yelling, stomping out of the room, and they quickly escalated to threats, pounding the walls, trying various ways to get all of the adults escalated. My other 2 children knew to wait where they were and to show no emotion as best as they could. I was immovable, like I had long ago learned to be during rages. My voice was always steady and calm, and my facial expression as flat as possible. My eyes never meeting theirs, but still able to track them slyly from my periphery so I could be ready to swing into action if they escalated to harming themselves or others. They began to antagonize one of the therapists, saying things they knew she would find personally hurtful, and ran up to her with a fist raised as if they were going to punch her in the face. A split second after they dropped their fist and turned to go into their room, she broke. Her voice rose as she threatened that if they didn't knock this behavior off, she was going to call the police. It was a very human response to what the child was doing. A very human response, but exactly the wrong one. The shock could be felt by my other two children and I. She knew better on an intellectual level, not to yell and not to threaten punishments when a traumatized child is escalated. You have to be calm. You have to keep your voice and expression completely neutral, waiting until the child's escalated state starts to calm. My other two children and I had had extensive practice over the years, but I do not believe the therapist had ever faced a situation like this in real life before. Books are not the same as dealing with it in real life. It's easy to give advice when you don't have to live with it. Or maybe my child just poked a really sensitive spot for the therapist. I do not know. Yelling and making threats only escalates the situation exponentially as it feeds their rage and prolongs it, usually doubling the length of time of the rage. And if you go another step further and do successfully dominate and subdue a rad child with physical force or threats of it, it is not over. They will do anything to pay you back 10 times more as soon as the event is done. And the cycle repeats itself from there. All the while you have confirmed to them their firmly held belief that adults cannot be trusted and they are justified in all of their behaviors. This is just one example out of hundreds of how rad children, trauma children, do not respond like other kids who are more neurotypical and securely attached to their parents. Everything you do with them is almost backwards and upside down to what would work with other children, which is why when others see how we're parenting, we get judged and shamed and blamed because they don't realize that our children need to be parented in a completely upside down backwards way. Completely. It will make no sense to any other adult. And so we wind up losing a lot of people in our lives because they don't agree with our parenting style, but they know nothing of trauma. My rad, who was, like I said, 12 at the time, pivoted and grabbed therapist keys off the end of the table near them and ran out the front door to key their car. As soon as the door was closed behind them, I sternly said to the therapist to stop yelling and stay neutral because she had just escalated the situation. I told her they were unlikely to do what I told her my child was unlikely to do what the therapist said they were going to do, but if they did, we would deal with it then. If she went out there or continued to engage with them or raise her voice, they would likely continue to escalate and become even more volatile and uncontrollable. She did stop. She did know and acknowledge that this was not the right way to handle it. They had just gotten to her at that moment. We went on with the session, pretending as if nothing was happening with my rad child. Eventually, my child calmed and re-entered the session appropriately. They had not scratched the therapist's car, and they began to express some shame at what they had done. There was not enough time to resolve all that had gone on before the end of the session, or get back to the main issue on how my child needs to get themselves ready in the morning independently. We never really did get to that point. Within a few months, my child had escalated so much, so often, that after one horrendous 4.5 hour long rage, they had to be removed from my home. It has been over 3 years since then, and still no progress has been made. Their disorder is much, much worse now. They have yet to be in a placement where any professional who works with them has any specialized knowledge or experience with reactive attachment disorder. Despite multiple therapies and therapists, I never did find a RAD therapist in my area that could work with my child while they lived with me. Took a really long time to educate myself on reactive attachment disorder, what works, what doesn't work, and even know what to look for. A lot of this I did not learn until after they no longer lived with me. I really needed someone who could guide me on what to expect with reactive attachment disorder and how to move forward with my child and family as a whole. Providers need to be upfront when they really don't know very much about the disorder or what healing looks like for them. It would have really helped at the time my child was 12, when my child was 12, was escalating, to sit down with me and develop a plan if they continued to escalate. A lot of my worries could have been alleviated if I had known that it is not unusual for RADs to need some time in a residential facility or specialized out-of-home placement, or that it was not a failure on my parenting. I needed to know that I should have been keeping records for the frequency of their rages, the length of them, and if they were getting more intense. A plan should have been put in place where the therapists were also keeping track of methods I tried, how little my child responded to them, and also how much these escalations were affecting each person in our family and our family's functioning as a whole. Acts of violence and threats of violence needed to be at least recorded, if not reported, to the police for an official paper trail. Not as a threat in the heat of escalation, but as a predetermined response ahead of time. This would have been communicated to my child as a new rule, like saying, in this house, we all have the right to feel safe. No one has the right to hurt or threaten to hurt someone else. So from now on, every time someone physically hurts another person or threatens to, I will be calling the police to make a report of it. What they do with that knowledge from then is up to them. But we all have the right to feel safe in this house, and this behavior is not okay here. We all should have been assessed to see if we were beginning to show signs of trauma from not only having to live walking on eggshells, never sure when they would explode, but also because of the superhuman strength it takes to remain neutral while a person rages around you from anywhere from 20 minutes to 3 hours to 8 hours, trying to incite anger before being able to calm themselves down. Because I did not have records of my RAD child's violence and behavior leading up to their removal, it took years for CPS and the court to even believe they needed a high-level therapeutic setting. My child had to earn their way to a residential facility they needed from the beginning by failing out of one placement after another. It has taken 3 years. My heart has been broken so many times over the years. My heart breaks for my child that hasn't healed, and very well may not, with the way our mental health system is set up. I know now that there was no way any of these therapies I pursued for years would have helped my RAD. And as much as their early trauma was pre-verbal and they could not have engaged in any meaningful way with talk therapy, it would have been great if they had been diagnosed earlier than they were. Years of their childhood were spent going to hundreds of hours of ineffectual therapies and therapists who are treating a disorder that really needs a specialist and vastly different methods and approaches than what is used with any other mental health condition. Things like neurofeedback, biofeedback, MNRI would have helped a lot and been a lot more impactful when they were younger, along with a specialist in reactive attachment disorder who either does attachment therapy or DGT therapy. My hope in speaking out is that more families like mine learn from my experience and get the help that they need. That encompasses what all our families experience. Personally, for me, speaking on my glimpse in life, the first few years, I've told my story so many times, it's exhausting. But the first few years, I was just told by their social workers, they just need to feel loved and safe and the behaviors will stop. And then they told me, well, once you sign the adoption papers, the behaviors will stop because then they'll know that it's forever and that will make them feel loved and safe. And they say that there's post-adoption services and they'll be with you the whole time to hold your hand to get through it. Just sign those adoption papers, and you sign those adoption papers and everyone disappears. And then all of a sudden, everything that your child is doing and everything that's happening is your fault. My children came to me in 2013 and weren't diagnosed until 2016 and 2018, actually, for official diagnoses. But in that beginning, I knew nothing. 2013, 2014, 2015. I knew nothing of reactive attachment disorder, trauma. Every parenting strategy, every therapy, everything I did was the wrong way to parent my children. I interacted with them when they yelled at me, when they purposely broke something, when they were physically, punched their brother or, got physical with each other or tried to get physically aggressive with me or became destructive or stole or, I yelled, I screamed. I'm Italian from New York. I was emotional. I showed it, engaged. My youngest son's rages could last for days. Not his fault, mine and every professional around me, because I had no idea that I was supposed to ignore it, stay neutral, not have a facial expression, not have a tone in my voice, nothing. If I had known then what I know now, my children would probably be in a better place in their life. I got started so late on everything because everyone lied to me. Nobody wanted to be honest. They honestly just wanted me to sign the adoption papers, which I would have done regardless because I loved my children. I love them fiercely. That's why attached families exist. We need to continue to tell our stories. We need society to understand that it is not bad parenting. We are not failures. We are not people to be shamed and blamed. We are loving families that do everything for our children. And 95% of you could not live in our shoes for a week. But you all want to blame us when something goes really wrong. Why didn't the parents do something? Why didn't they get them help? Even the professionals know that they are not helping us. They are not doing anything. There's not a single facility for our children that is covered by insurance, Medicaid, which is what our adopted from foster care children have. Not a single facility for them that we don't have to pay out of pocket at like $700 a day, if you're that rich, something has to change. We love our children. Stop judging us. Stop shaming us. Open your hearts and your minds. Support us a little more. Love us a little more. And help us get the laws changed and insurance laws changed and facilities and build that will actually meet the needs of our children to help them heal. Our children need to heal. Trauma affects the way their brains develop, and it is so important to help their brain heal. Because once that connection is made and healed, they are now open to other therapies and they can live happy, successful lives. And if more parents who foster or foster to adopt or adopt from foster care or adopt in general, if they're told the truth from the beginning, if they're helped and supported from the beginning, it would be life-changing for these children, for our children, for my family's children, all across the globe. All we are doing is ensuring that by the time they turn 18, thousands and thousands and thousands of children who have had this, whose parents have struggled for years to get them help, you'll just wind up in prison. I guarantee you, if you go to any jail or prison and do a brain scan, brain mapping, you'll find that every one of those people have trauma, that their brains did not develop properly. You want to talk about the foster care to prison pipeline? You want to talk about trauma and the brain? You want to go in California, you want to find out, do ACE tests, see how many people have trauma. Stop talking about it. Do something. Fix it. Help attached families. Help our families. Let's break the cycle. Thank you for listening, if you did. I know this was a long one, but it was so powerful and important for me to share. It's Katie Rose, coming to you with my Coke and my smokes, because this is what gets me through every single day with children that I love desperately. And this is what helps me to help our thousands of family members in attached families. And if you're not a parent or a caregiver, you can still help us. So please check out all of our glimpses and read up on it. Do your own research. Don't be so closed-minded. Don't say we're just using it as an excuse because we don't know how to parent. We're not lazy. Trust me. We work harder as parents than you'd ever possibly imagine. So have a great day. I love all of my families desperately and all of our supporters. You have no idea. Katie Rose, love you. Bye.